They left me in the cold that Christmas morning, and the first thing I saw under the tree wasn't a ribboned box, but an envelope stamped with the county court's seal. Not a greeting, not a note, not even a lie to make the blow softer. Just that envelope, waiting for me like a verdict. I stood there in my robe, the kettle whistling behind me, and for a moment I thought my eyes had deceived me. At 78, your sight can betray you, but not like this. Not with something so deliberate. I picked it up carefully, as if it might break in my hands. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that used to mean my husband was still asleep. I hadn't heard a step outside, no car, no familiar laugh of my grandchildren rushing toward the porch. They'd promised they'd come early. "Christmas breakfast at your place, Grandma," they'd said. I'd even baked the cinnamon rolls they always begged for. Foolish old woman. I should have known better. My fingers weren't trembling when I opened the envelope. That part still surprises me. I thought I'd shake like I did the day they told me Henry wouldn't come home from the hospital. But no. My hands were steady, calm even, as though some part of me had been waiting for this truth to reveal itself. "Notice of eviction," it read. "Petitioner, Daniel Ellingham." My son. My own son. I stood there for a long time, reading the same lines again and again, until the words lost their meaning and became nothing more than shapes on paper. The kettle had gone silent. The rolls were cooling on the counter, and I suddenly became aware of how cold the floor felt beneath my feet. I'd left the heating on a low setting overnight, but the house still carried that December chill, the kind that creeps into your bones and stays. I walked to the window. The yard was covered in frost, the breath of winter settling on every branch, every stone. Our old oak tree, the one Henry planted the year Danny was born, was shining as if dusted with sugar. I used to decorate it with Danny when he was little, hanging the wooden stars he made at school. Back then, he held my hand tightly, proudly. He used to say, "Mom, this tree is ours." I suppose it still is, only now he wants it without me. I sat down slowly, folding the letter in half. Not because I wanted to keep it neat, but because I couldn't bear to look at that seal anymore. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and taken something important, something they had no right to touch. No one had called, not a single message, not even the weak sort of apology that sounds more like an excuse. I checked the phone twice, then 3 times, though I already knew what I'd find. Nothing. I thought of the gifts I'd wrapped the night before, small things, a book for my granddaughter, a warm scarf for my grandson, and for Daniel, a framed photograph from the year he turned 10. The last Christmas where we were truly together. I'd chosen it because I thought he might want to remember that boy he used to be. A foolish thought. The house felt larger than usual, as if the walls had pulled away from me. I didn't cry. Tears belong to a different kind of pain, the softer kind. This was something else. A deeper, quieter cut. The kind that doesn't bleed, only hollows. I stood again and walked back to the tree. The branches were uneven this year. My hands aren't as steady as they used to be, and I fussed too long over the lights. But in the morning glow, they looked gentle, almost forgiving. Funny, how even the smallest lights can make a cold room feel less empty. I picked up the envelope once more. It felt heavier than it should have, like it carried not just paper, but years of small humiliations I'd ignored, the quiet dismissals, the way Daniel's wife would glance at my clothes as if measuring their worth. I'd turned a blind eye to all of it. I always thought that if I waited long enough, they'd soften toward me. that maybe love comes back when you don't demand it. But standing there, in the stillness of Christmas morning, I understood something with a clarity that felt almost cruel. Love doesn't return when you let people walk over you. Respect doesn't grow in the shadow of silence. I folded the notice again, this time with purpose. And then, very quietly, I whispered to the empty room, "All right then." A different kind of morning had begun. I set the notice on the kitchen table, smoothing its edges the way I used to smooth Danny's hair when he was a boy. Back then, he'd lean into my hand, trusting, warm. Now the only warmth in the room came from the oven, where the rolls had long since gone cold. I stood there, looking at that piece of paper, and the thought came to me, not loud, not angry, but steady as breath. If they want my home, they will have to take it from a woman who finally knows her worth. I reached for my glasses. The text blurred for a second before settling into sharp reality. They wanted the house. My house. The one Henry and I bought when we were young and dumb enough to think the world wouldn't ever bend us. We saved for years for the down payment. I remember the day we signed the papers. Henry's hand over mine, his laugh echoing in the tiny office. "A home of our own, Mar," he said. "Something no one can take away from us." He was wrong, of course. People will take anything if you let them. I pulled out a notebook from the drawer, the one where I wrote down important things now that my memory sometimes wandered like an old dog. I copied the date from the top of the notice. Hearing in 21 days. 21 days to lose everything, or to decide I wasn't going quietly. My chair complained as I sat. 78 years of sitting in that same chair will make anything groan. I spread the notice beside the notebook and began reading every line, every clause. Failure to vacate may result in petitioner claims ownership due to transfer signed, and there it was. The signature they claimed was mine. A transfer of ownership I had never signed. My first instinct was disbelief. My second was a memory. 2 summers ago, Danny stopping by unannounced with a stack of insurance forms he said needed just a quick signature for some refinancing he was doing. He rushed me, talked fast, covered half the pages with his hand. I remember thinking, this boy is hiding something. But he was my son, and I signed. Not for a second did I think he would slip something else between the papers. The room felt colder. I pulled my cardigan tighter around me, as if cloth could shield me from betrayal. Outside, a wind shook the branches, and a shower of frost fell like silver dust. I watched it for a moment. The world looked peaceful. What a lie that was. I stood and walked slowly through the house. The living room first. The sofa Henry fell asleep on every night after work. The clock on the wall still keeping time though the frame had begun to fade. The crooked picture of Danny holding his first school project, a cardboard rocket he'd insisted could fly. I kept all these things because they were pieces of my life, pieces I wasn't ready to lose. I touched the mantel, the familiar grain of old wood smooth beneath my fingers. "This is my home," I whispered, not to the house, but to myself. Mine. I thought of calling Danny, asking him why, asking him if he understood what he had done, but I could already hear his voice, smooth, practiced. "Mom, you must be confused. You must have misunderstood. Let me explain." Just enough reassurance to silence me. Just enough condescension to make me doubt my own memory. No, not this time. Instead, I went to the hall closet where Henry used to keep the important things. His toolbox, old tax returns, the binder with every receipt from when we renovated the kitchen ourselves. In the back, behind a stack of winter blankets I almost never used, was the folder I needed. The house deed. The original. My name. Henry's name. No transfer. No amendments. No signatures forged in a moment of trust. I carried it to the kitchen table like it was something fragile. Spread it out beside the court notice. The truth and the lie side by side. For years I had let my son talk to me as though I were made of paper, thin, easy to fold. Perhaps he mistook age for weakness. Many do. But age is just time, and time has a way of sharpening some people instead of wearing them down. I sat there for a long moment, breathing slowly, letting my anger settle into something more useful. Resolve. It felt unfamiliar at first, then strangely comfortable, like a coat I hadn't worn in decades, but that still fit. I closed the notebook. "I'm not leaving," I said aloud. And hearing my own voice, steady and certain, made something inside me straighten. They wanted a quiet old woman. They were about to meet someone else entirely. By the time the morning light shifted across the kitchen floor, I had already made my decision. Not the loud kind, not the dramatic kind, the sort that settles into your bones like warmth after a long, cold walk. I folded the deed, placed it carefully in a plastic sleeve, and set it beside the notice. If they wanted a battle, I would give them one. But first, I had to secure the ground beneath my feet. The phone sat on the counter, silent and indifferent. I picked it up with a steadiness I didn't fully feel and dialed the bank. I'd been with them for 39 years. They still addressed me as Mrs. Ellingham, the way Henry liked to hear it. After 3 rings, a woman picked up. "Good morning, Pine County Savings. This is Laura speaking." "Good morning, dear," I said. "My name is Martha Ellingham. I need to discuss my accounts." Her tone warmed immediately. "Of course, Mrs. Ellingham. Let me pull up your file." I waited, staring at the frost on the window pane. It looked delicate, almost beautiful. Strange how beauty can grow out of cold. "All right," she said. "How can I assist you today?" I took a breath, small but certain. "I want to remove all external authorizations on my accounts. Every automatic payment, every shared access code, every transfer capability linked to anyone but me. Temporarily suspend them until I can come in personally to finalize the changes." A short silence, then a careful, "Mrs. Ellingham, do you mean all authorized users, including the ones currently listed as secondary managers?" Secondary managers. What a polite little phrase for a son who treats your money like his safety net. "Yes," I said. "Every single one." Her keyboard clicked rapidly. "All right. I can place suspensions immediately. Just to confirm, Daniel Ellingham will no longer have access to your checking, savings, or investment accounts. Are you certain you want that?" I looked at the court notice. My son's name printed at the top like a signature on betrayal. "Yes, I'm certain." "Understood," she said more softly. "The suspension is active. You'll need to come in tomorrow to sign the permanent removal forms." "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Ellingham?" she added gently. A simple question. Too big an answer. "Yes," I lied. "Just time to make some adjustments." When I hung up, the house felt quieter again, but not the empty kind of quiet. More like the silence before a door opens. Next, I pulled my small address book from the drawer. The same one I'd kept since the 90s. Pages soft from years of turning. My lawyer's number was still written in Henry's neat handwriting. Thomas H. Buckley, attorney at law. Henry had trusted him, and I decided I would too, but I'd call him later. Right now, I needed to brace myself for the storm I knew was coming. It didn't take long. My phone chimed, A message from Daniel. Mom, did you change something with the bank? Your mortgage transfer didn't go through. Call me. Mortgage transfer. So that was what he had been doing, using my accounts to maintain payments on a house I barely set foot in, a house his wife never allowed me to stay in for more than an hour. Another message came in before I finished reading the first. Mom, seriously, I need you to call me ASAP. I set the phone down without responding. Let him wait. Let him feel for just 1 hour what I had felt for years, that ache of reaching for someone who isn't there. I tidied the kitchen slowly, wiping the counter, folding the towel, putting away the flour I had left out from baking the rolls. Those small movements steadied my breath. They reminded me that a woman who can keep a home running for decades can also reclaim it when someone tries to take it from her. The phone rang. This time a call. I didn't move to answer. It rang again. And again. 5 times in total before stopping. He'd call back. They always do when they need something. The rolls had cooled completely by now. I placed them into a tin, one of those old metal ones with a faded picture of Christmas candles. I covered it gently and slid it into the fridge. Maybe I'd give them to my neighbor later. Maybe I'd eat one myself. Or maybe I'd throw the whole tin out. I hadn't decided. The phone rang again. Danny. I let it go to voicemail. Instead, I went to the mirror in the hallway. The woman looking back at me wasn't frail. Older, yes. Softer in places, certainly. But the eyes, they were clear now, not clouded by excuses or the hope that people would change simply because you wanted them to. This is my house, I said to the reflection, my life, and I will not be pushed out of it. Another ring, another message. I walked past the phone without picking it up. Outside, the frost was melting. And for the first time in years, something inside me was thawing with it. By afternoon, the sky had turned the color of pewter, the kind of heavy gray that sits low over rooftops and presses against the windows. I made myself a cup of tea, though I barely tasted the first sip. My mind was already several steps ahead, moving toward the one task I had delayed far too long, calling an attorney. I took Thomas Buckley's card from the drawer, a plain cream rectangle with bold black lettering. Henry had trusted him. I trusted Henry. That would have to be enough. My hands were steady as I dialed. Buckley Law Office, this is Karen speaking, a warm voice answered. Good afternoon, dear. My name is Martha Ellingham. I need to speak to Mr. Buckley if he's available. One moment, she said. I waited, listening to the faint hum of the office on the other end, printers, murmured voices, the clink of someone's cup. Life moving as usual, unaware that someone's entire world had been upended by a single sheet of paper. Mrs. Ellingham, a deeper voice finally came on the line. It's been a long time. What can I do for you? I swallowed once. Thomas, I received a court notice this morning. Eviction. Filed by my son. Saying it aloud made it feel both more real and more absurd. I didn't sign anything to surrender my home, but there's a transfer document attached with what appears to be my signature. Silence. Not the thoughtless kind, the professional kind, the kind that meant he was already sorting through the possibilities. Did you authorize any property transfer at any time? He asked. No, I said. But 2 years ago, he brought me some insurance papers. I signed one page he put in front of me, but I never saw anything about the house. A bait and switch, Thomas said quietly. Not uncommon, unfortunately. Uncommon or not, hearing it spoken plainly made a knot form in my chest. Not fear, not exactly, but something like a bruise. Mrs. Ellingham, he continued, I want you to bring the notice, the deed, and any documents you think he may have slipped into that packet. Do you have the original house deed?" "Yes," I said. "I found it this morning." "That's very good. That will matter. Now, did your son have power of attorney over you?" "No," I answered, "but he had access to my bank accounts. Not anymore." "Good," he said again, and I could hear the approval in his voice like a slow nod. "I can meet with you tomorrow at 10. Don't sign or discuss anything with him until then." "He's been calling all morning," I said. "I imagine he has. Don't answer." His tone softened. "Martha, I'm sorry you're going through this." I closed my eyes for a moment. Just hearing my name spoken gently loosened something inside me. "Thank you, Thomas," I said. "I'll see you tomorrow." When the call ended, the house felt different. Not lighter, not yet, but steadier. Like the ground beneath my feet had stopped shifting. I set the card down and looked at the two documents on the table, the real deed and the forged transfer. A strange pair. Truth and deception sitting side by side. The phone buzzed again. Danny. I let it ring until the sound became nothing more than background noise. A minute later, another message arrived. "Mom, you can't just cut off payments. We need to talk. Call me." I turned the phone face down. Whatever panic he was feeling wasn't my responsibility. Not anymore. I moved through the house again, but this time I wasn't wandering. I was taking stock. The living room, the bedroom, the study Henry once used before the arthritis stiffened his fingers. Every object felt like it belonged to me again, as if someone had tried to loosen my grip but failed. In the hallway, the floor creaked under my steps. Henry used to say old houses talk to you if you listen closely enough. Today, it felt like the house wasn't just talking. It was choosing a side. Outside, I heard a car slow down. My breath caught, but I didn't go to the window right away. I didn't want to see his headlights, his shape on the porch, his desperate knocking. But the car didn't stop. It continued down the street until the sound faded into nothing. I exhaled slowly. Relief mixed with something like disappointment, not because I wanted him here, but because part of me still couldn't believe he'd sent that notice and stayed away. I went back to the kitchen, poured the tea that had gone cold, and warmed it again in the microwave. A small act, but necessary. The kind of act a woman performs when she's reclaiming pieces of herself, one quiet moment at a time. As the cup turned slowly behind the microwave glass, I thought, tomorrow, I will walk into that law office not as a frightened old woman, but as a woman defending her life. And when the beeping signaled the tea was hot again, I took it out and held it between my palms, feeling the warmth seep in. A reminder that even in winter, even in betrayal, something can still thaw. The evening settled over the house like a heavy quilt, the kind that doesn't warm you but presses down on your chest. I'd turned on only one lamp in the living room, letting the dim glow fill the space. It suited the day, soft, quiet, withholding. I sat in Henry's old armchair, the court notice on the table beside me, and listened to the silence. A silence broken only by the phone vibrating again and again. It buzzed once more, then twice, then a third time, more insistent, as if the device itself were anxious on Danny's behalf. I looked at the screen. Voicemail. Again. Then a text flashed across it. "Mom, you need to answer. This is serious." I couldn't help a small, bitter smile. Serious? I suppose it becomes serious only when the consequences reach their doorstep. Until then, my quiet suffering had been convenient for everyone. A moment later, another vibration, this time from his wife, Sandra. "Martha, we're worried. Please call us." Worried. That word had no business in her mouth. She'd spent years speaking to me in a tone usually reserved for outdated furniture. Polite, controlled, dismissive. Now suddenly she was worried. I let the message fade from the screen without touching it. I took a slow breath, steadying myself for what I suspected would come next. And I didn't have to wait long. The phone rang loudly, shattering the quiet. I didn't rush to answer. I picked it up as if it were any other call on any other unremarkable day. "Hello?" I said calmly. "Mom?" His voice was tight, panicked around the edges. "Finally. Why haven't you been answering?" "I didn't feel like talking," I replied, my tone flat as winter air. "Mom, listen. Something's wrong with the accounts. I tried to pay the mortgage and it bounced. I need to know what's going on." "So do I said. "For instance, why I received a notice from the county court this morning with your name on it." Dead silence. I could almost hear him swallow. "Well," he started too quickly. "There must be some sort of misunderstanding. Let me come over and explain." "No," I said. "You can explain right now." He hesitated. I imagined him standing in his kitchen, one hand on his hip, the other rubbing his forehead the way he always did when his lies came faster than his thoughts. "Mom, I didn't mean for it to look like that." "No?" My voice stayed calm. "It looked like you were removing me from my house." "It's not like that," he insisted. "The lawyer said, well, he said that with the refinancing options and the tax benefits. Look, it's complicated. But I wasn't kicking you out. It's just paperwork." Paperwork. A word people use when they want you to stop asking questions. "Your signature is on the petition," I said. "How complicated is that to explain?" He exhaled sharply, frustrated that I wasn't accepting the script he'd prepared. "Mom, why are you being difficult? You always trusted me with these things." "That was my mistake," I answered. Silence again, the kind that bruises. When he spoke next, his tone had shifted, softened artificially. "Mom, you know I love you. We all do. Sandra's been worried sick. She thinks you're confused or upset. And honestly, I'm starting to think so too." Ah, there it was. When cornered, diminish the mother. Question her memory. Suggest fragility. It's a script older than I am. "Danny," I said softly, "I am many things, but confused is not one of them." He raised his voice a little, trying to reclaim the upper hand. "You shouldn't be handling legal or financial decisions alone, especially now. You're older." "I'm aware of my age." "Then act like it," he snapped. "Let me help." "Help?" I repeated, letting the word sit heavy between us. "Help like you did this morning?" He groaned, exasperated. "Mom, you're blowing this out of proportion. If you just give me temporary access again, I can fix everything before it escalates." There it was. His real goal, exposed like wiring behind a broken wall. "I've already spoken to the bank," I said. "Your access has been revoked." A long pause. Then, coldly, "You had no right to do that." "Oh, but I did," I replied. "It's my money. My home. My life." His tone shifted again, panic replacing anger. "Mom, please, don't make this harder. There are payments coming up, bills, the kids' school fees." "I'm sure you and Sandra will manage," I said. "You're both grown. You both have jobs." "That's not the point," he snapped. "It is to me." He tried a different tactic, the guilt angle. "We've taken care of you for years, Mom." I almost laughed. Not out of humor, but disbelief. I thought of the lonely holidays, the rushed visits, the meals I paid for, the way he spoke about me to others as if I were already fading from the world. "No," I said quietly. You haven't. His voice wavered then, brittle as dry leaves. So what? What are you going to do? Fight me? I'm going to defend myself, I answered. Mom, don't do this, he said, now pleading. You don't understand what you're starting. On the contrary, I said, for the first time in years, I do. And then, before he could recover, before he could launch another emotional trap, I ended the call. The silence returned, but this time it didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. It felt like a room finally clearing after years of stale air. I set the phone down gently. Tomorrow, I would walk into the lawyer's office with everything I had. Tonight, I allowed myself one deep breath, steady, deliberate. The kind of breath a woman takes before she steps out of a shadow she never realized she was standing in. The morning arrived pale and brittle, the kind of winter light that lies flat across the street and makes everything look a little washed out. I dressed slowly, choosing the navy coat Henry bought me for my 72nd birthday. The sleeves had loosened over the years, but the fabric still held the memory of his careful taste. I buttoned it all the way to the collar, not for warmth, but for resolve. The documents sat inside my bag. The real deed, the forged transfer, the court notice, and my notebook. Together they made more weight than paper should. I carried them like proof of a life I refused to surrender. The walk from the driveway to the cab felt longer than usual. My knees protested every step, but I kept going. Some things must be done without hesitation. The driver, a young man with kind eyes, helped me into the back seat. He didn't speak much, but I caught him glancing at me in the mirror from time to time, as if he sensed I was carrying something heavy, even if he couldn't see it. When we reached the law office, the cold bit at my cheeks the second the door opened. Buckley's building stood modest among taller ones. Brick facade, brass handle, the kind of place that didn't need to announce itself loudly. Inside, the warmth was immediate, smelling faintly of paper, ink, and the soft citrus scent from a small diffuser on the counter. "Mrs. Ellingham?" the receptionist asked, rising at once. "Mr. Buckley is ready for you." I followed her down the hallway. My footsteps sounded firm on the wooden floor. Thomas Buckley stood when I entered. He looked older than I remembered, gray at the temples, deeper lines around the eyes. But there was a sharpness in his gaze that reassured me. "Martha," he said, offering his hand. "I'm glad you came." "So am I," I replied. We sat, and I placed the documents on the table between us. He examined each one with the patience of a man who has seen the worst people can do to those who trusted them. When he reached the forged transfer, he paused. "This signature," he said softly, "isn't a good forgery. They probably assumed you'd never contest it." "They assumed correctly, until yesterday," I said. He gave me a long look. "You're stronger than you realize." I didn't answer. Strength is easier to recognize in hindsight than in the moment you need it. Thomas opened a folder from his desk. "We're going to do 3 things today," he said. "First, file a formal response contesting the eviction and requesting immediate dismissal. Second, submit a legal statement declaring the signature fraudulent. Third, begin the paperwork to protect your assets going forward." "Protect them how?" I asked. "With a trust," he said. "One that places your property, your savings, your investments under your control alone, with strict conditions for any future access." I nodded. "Good. Is there anyone," he added carefully, "you trust enough to include as a future beneficiary? Someone who won't use the position against you?" I thought immediately of Lily, my granddaughter, the only one who still visited without expectation, the only one who listened as if my words mattered. "Just her," I said. "No one else?" He smiled. A single beneficiary simplifies the structure. And what happens, I asked, if my son tries this again? Then he'll find nothing left to reach for, Thomas said. No legal rights, no financial access, no control. A warmth spread through my chest, not joy, not triumph, but something close to relief. A slow easing of a burden I hadn't known was strangling me. Thomas took out several documents. We'll go through these together. No rush. Every page matters, and you'll sign only when you understand each line. It took an hour, maybe longer. My fingers cramped slightly, but my mind did not. Each signature felt like a brick placed back into the foundation of my life. When we finished, Thomas sat back. You've done well today, Martha. Not many people your age handle this so decisively, especially under emotional pressure. I gathered the papers. I've spent too many years being quiet, I said. Silence can be mistaken for agreement. His eyes softened. You're reclaiming your life. That's no small thing. The receptionist insisted on helping me with my coat. As she guided the sleeves over my arms, she whispered, You remind me of my grandmother. She never let anyone walk over her either. I gave her a small smile. It's never too late to learn. Outside, the cold struck again, but it no longer felt as sharp. I stood still for a moment, breathing in the air, letting it settle around me like a reminder that I was, in fact, still here, still capable, still whole. The cab pulled up, and I climbed inside with slow confidence. The driver looked at me in the mirror again. Everything all right, ma'am? He asked. I fastened my seatbelt. Better than it was yesterday. As we drove home, the weight in my bag felt different. Not the burden of papers meant to erase me, but the weight of protections I had chosen myself. For the first time since the notice arrived, I felt something close to calm. Not because the fight was over, it had barely begun, but because I finally remembered that I wasn't powerless. And remembering is its own kind of victory. By the time I returned home, the sun was already low, hanging above the rooftops like a pale coin someone had forgotten to collect. I let myself into the house, closing the door quietly behind me. The air inside felt still, as if it had been holding its breath waiting for me. I set my bag down on the kitchen table, gently, almost ceremonially. Today it held the first real defense I'd had in years, and I wasn't ready to part with that feeling yet. I didn't turn on the overhead lights. Instead, I lit the small lamp by the window, the one with the fabric shade Henry always said. Made the room look warm even when the heat wasn't on. Strange how a little glow could push back so much darkness. I boiled water for tea, though my body felt too tired to truly want it. The day had worn through me, in a good way, perhaps, but still enough to leave its mark. My knees ached from the cold, my back protested every time I bent. But my mind felt clearer than it had in years. There's a certain quiet power in knowing you finally have the tools to defend your own life. The kettle began to hum, that familiar sound that has accompanied almost every evening of my adulthood. I reached for the tin of cinnamon rolls I'd stored the night before. They were dense now, no longer soft, but I warmed one anyway. A small thing for a small comfort. While it heated, I moved to the living room and sat in Henry's armchair. The cushion had molded to my shape long ago. It held me as if it remembered me. Outside, the wind had picked up, brushing against the windows with a soft insistence. Christmas decorations still hung across the street, little lights blinking red and gold. Most of my neighbors had already celebrated with their families. Mine had tried to erase me instead. I rested my hands on my lap, fingers clasped loosely. Without thinking, I whispered, "Henry, I hope you'd be proud of me today." The room didn't answer, of course, but sometimes silence carries its own warmth, like an embrace you can't see. When the microwave chimed, I retrieved the roll and sat back down. The sweetness tasted muted, but it was enough. I chewed slowly, thoughtfully, feeling the weight of the day settle into my bones. Not a burdensome weight, just the acknowledgement of effort. My phone lay on the table beside me, turned face down. I hadn't checked it since leaving the lawyer's office. I wasn't sure I wanted to, but after a long moment, curiosity nudged me. I picked it up. 17 missed calls, 11 messages. The most recent one from Danny. "Mom, please call. We need to talk. This is getting out of control." Out of control? An interesting phrase from a man who'd thought he could quietly sign away my home. Sandra had written too, in her clipped, immaculate style. "Martha, I'm concerned about your behavior. We need a calm, rational conversation." Behavior. Calm, rational. Funny how those words always arrived when they wanted to shape me back into something small. I turned the phone off again. Tonight wasn't theirs. Tonight was mine. I returned to the armchair with a blanket and pulled it over my knees. My body softened into the fabric. For the first time in so many years, I felt my breath ease. Nothing had been resolved yet. The hearing was still weeks away. Danny would not give up quietly. Sandra would sharpen her voice like a blade. The storm was still ahead. But somewhere deep within me, a part of myself I thought had been lost stirred awake, slowly, painfully, but undeniably alive. I looked at the tree in the corner of the room. Its lights blinked softly, the faint pine scent still lingering. Beneath it lay the gifts I'd wrapped for my grandchildren. My Lily's was at the front, a simple book, but chosen with love. I thought of her bright eyes, the way she always paused before leaving, as if she didn't want to step too far from me. If anyone deserved anything from me, it was her. I imagined her face when she learned what her father had done. The disappointment, the disbelief. She had a tenderness in her that was rare these days. A gust of wind rattled the window lightly. I sipped the last of my tea. It had gone cool. A chill moved across the room, settling at my feet. I tucked the blanket tighter and whispered, to myself, to the house, to whatever part of my life still listened. "I'm not afraid of them anymore." The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They simply existed, firm and steady. Tonight wasn't triumphant or grand. It was quiet. A night of stillness after taking the first true step in protecting what was mine. And sometimes, quiet is the strongest victory a woman can have. The next morning arrived with a hard light, the kind that doesn't warm but exposes. It slipped through the curtains in thin, sharp lines, touching the kitchen counters, the backs of the chairs, the floorboards that had known every step of my life. I stood there for a moment in that pale brightness, hands wrapped around a mug of tea, letting the steam soften the stiffness in my fingers. I knew he would come today. Men like Danny don't tolerate losing control, not even for a night. And I had taken far more from him than access to my accounts. I had taken the certainty he carried like a second skin, the belief that I would bend. I had no intention of bending ever again. The knock came late in the morning, 3 sharp raps, assertive, impatient. I didn't hurry. I placed the mug down, straightened the blanket on the armchair, and walked to the door at my own pace. Let him wait. A little waiting never hurt anyone. When I opened the door, Danny stood there alone. No Sandra. His attempt at a calm expression didn't fool me. His jaw was tight, his eyes restless. He looked like a man who had not slept. "Mom," he said quickly, "we need to talk." "I assumed so," I replied. He stepped inside without waiting for the invitation. I closed the door behind him, noting how he glanced around the house as if taking inventory of everything he believed would soon be his. That alone told me I had done the right thing hiring Thomas. Danny stood in the middle of the living room, hands on his hips, breathing tight. "Why did you cut off all the bank permissions? Why didn't you answer your phone? What's going on with you?" I walked past him and took my seat in Henry's armchair. "Sit if you'd like," I said. He remained standing. "Mom, this isn't funny. I had payments scheduled. Commitments. You can't just—" "I can," I said gently. And I did. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if steadying himself. "All right. Fine. Let's discuss this. Rationally." He added that word with the same patronizing tone Sandra had used in her message. "I'm perfectly rational," I said. He let out a short, humorless laugh. "Really? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're sabotaging your own security. That's what this house transfer was supposed to be about: protection, tax benefits, stability." I looked him squarely in the eye. "I spoke to Thomas Buckley yesterday." That stopped him. His face twitched. He hadn't expected that. "I'm having the eviction dismissed," I continued, "and the signature you submitted will be legally challenged as fraudulent." His voice hardened. "Mom, you're being dramatic. I didn't forge anything." "You handed me papers to sign without disclosure," I said. "That is enough." He stepped forward. "Do you have any idea what a mess you're creating?" "For you?" I asked softly. "Yes, I imagine it's quite a mess." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing now. "Mom, listen. Sandra and we've been under a lot of pressure. The kids have school, the mortgage. Your finances," I interrupted, "are not my burden." He froze, staring at me as though he'd misheard. I continued, my voice calm, steady, almost quiet. "I raised you. I paid for everything until the day you moved out. I helped with every crisis you invented. I covered debts, school fees, medical bills, and more lies than I care to count. And now you want my home." His face flushed. "I don't want your home, You filed the petition," I said. "Whatever words you choose now won't change that." He stepped closer again, lowering his voice as though trying to regain the upper hand. "Mom, you're 78. This house is too much for you. You could fall, get hurt. We're just trying to keep you safe." I straightened in my chair. "I am safer now than I have ever been." He blinked. "I've placed everything into a trust," I said. "Everything, under my control until my death. And when I'm gone, Lily will inherit. Only Lily." Danny's mouth opened, then closed. A sound escaped him, half gasp, half disbelief. You're cutting us out?" "I am protecting myself," I said simply. He sank onto the sofa, staring at the floor. "How could you do this to me?" he whispered. That struck me, not with guilt, but with clarity. "I didn't do anything to you," I said. "I stopped doing things for you." "That's different." He looked up, eyes shining with a frustration he could no longer disguise. "You're my mother. You owe me." "I owe you nothing," I said. The silence that followed was unlike any we'd shared before. He looked at me not with anger now, but with something closer to fear. The realization that the woman he'd leaned on, manipulated and dismissed, had finally stepped out of the role he'd assigned her. He stood abruptly. "Sandra will want to talk to you," he muttered. "She can call my lawyer," I answered. He stared at me for a long moment, as if trying to find the mother he thought he could control. But that woman was gone. Finally, without a word, he walked to the door. And for the first time in my life, I didn't follow. I didn't soften. I didn't apologize. I simply let him go. When the door closed behind him, the house let out a soft creak, as if settling into a new shape, a freer one. I sat back in the armchair, pulling the blanket over my knees, listening to the quiet afternoon unfold around me. It was not triumph, I felt, nor sorrow, just truth. And the truth was steady. Lily came that afternoon, just as the light began to dim and the cold pressed tighter against the windows. I heard her footsteps on the porch before she even knocked. Light, quick, a little uncertain. She always approached my door like someone entering a chapel, with respect, with care. Not like her father, who barged in as though every threshold belonged to him. When I opened the door, her face softened with immediate relief. "Grandma, are you okay?" she asked, stepping inside and closing the door gently behind her, as if shielding me from something. "I'm all right, dear," I said. "Come in. The kettle's warm." She removed her gloves, stuffing them into her coat pockets, and followed me to the kitchen. She watched me move, concern clouding her eyes, the way children look at someone they love when they're afraid of what they might hear. "Dad's been acting strange," she said suddenly. "He won't tell me anything. Mom's tense. They keep whispering. I knew something was wrong." I poured the tea, placing her cup in front of her. "Your father filed to evict me," I said quietly. Her breath caught, small, sharp. "Evict? Grandma, what? Why would he do that?" The innocence in her question stung more than the event itself. She didn't yet understand how people can twist themselves into shapes that suit their wants, even when those shapes cut the ones they came from. "He thought he had the right," I said. "He thought I would accept it." She pressed her hand to her forehead, overwhelmed. I don't understand. He always swore he would take care of you someday." I almost smiled. "People say many things, Lily. What matters is what they do." She looked at me with those soft, earnest eyes that held none of Sandra's coldness and none of Danny's entitlement. "Did he trick you into signing something?" "Yes," I said. "But I've taken steps to protect myself now." Her shoulders sagged in relief. "Good. Good. You didn't deserve any of this." She reached for my hand, holding it with a firmness that reminded me of her as a child, clinging to me when she was frightened by thunder. Only now, she was holding on for me. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "Don't apologize for the actions of others, dear," I said gently. "We're only responsible for what we choose." Her grip tightened. "I choose you, Grandma. I always will." Warmth bloomed in my chest, a warmth I hadn't felt in weeks. "I know, sweetheart." She sat back, swallowing hard. "So, what happens next? Are you fighting him?" "I'm defending myself," I said. "The hearing will be dismissed. The forged papers will be dealt with. And everything else, my home, my savings, my future, is protected in a trust now." She blinked, taken aback. "You did all that? Alone?" "Not alone," I corrected. "But I made the decisions myself." Pride flickered across her face, genuine, unforced. "I'm glad. You deserve to feel safe." She looked around the room then, her gaze settling on the Christmas tree, on the untouched gifts beneath it. "Did you buy those for us?" "I did," I said. She went quiet, her eyes shimmering. "I wish they were better to you. I wish they understood what they have." I touched her cheek lightly. "Sometimes people don't recognize value until it's no longer theirs to touch." She nodded slowly, understanding more than her age would suggest. "If you need anything, I'm here. And I don't mean like Dad says it. when he only appears during emergencies he causes. I mean it. I know you do, I said softly. She helped me wash the cups afterward, drying them with the old cotton towel Henry used to use. She moved through my kitchen like she belonged there, not as a guest, but as family should. When she finally put on her coat to leave, she paused at the door. Grandma, whatever happens, please don't think you're alone. I stood straighter. I'm not alone, Lily. Not anymore. She hugged me tightly, fiercely, nothing delicate about it, and then stepped out into the cold. I watched her walk down the steps, her breath forming little clouds in the fading light. She didn't hurry. She looked back twice. When I closed the door, the house didn't feel empty. It felt claimed by me, by truth, by the quiet strength that had finally woken up inside my bones. Tomorrow would bring its own storm. But tonight, I had something solid again. Someone who still saw me. The next morning began before I was ready for it. Sleep had come in thin scraps, drifting in and out like someone pacing outside my bedroom door. I rose early anyway. There are days when you must meet life head-on, even if you feel made of nothing but creaking joints and stubborn breath. This was one of those days. A light snow had fallen overnight, dusting the yard in a soft white layer. It made everything look peaceful, though peace was the last thing stirring inside me. I brewed tea and sat at the kitchen table with the documents Thomas had prepared. The trust papers, the dismissal request, the affidavit challenging the forged signature. Words that once would have frightened me now felt like armor. The phone rang just as I finished reading the last page. I considered not answering, but something told me this call wasn't from Danny, and I was right. Mrs. Ellingham? A male voice asked. This is Jason Hill from the county clerk's office. I'm calling regarding your eviction case. My throat tightened, but my voice stayed level. Yes, I'm here. I'm reaching out to inform you that a stay has been placed on the proceedings, effective immediately. A pause stretched between his words and my understanding. A stay? I repeated. Yes, ma'am. Your attorney filed an emergency counterpetition late yesterday. After reviewing the documents and the potential evidence of fraud, the court agreed to pause all actions until a formal hearing can be arranged. I gripped the edge of the table. For a moment, it felt as though the air around me had turned too thick to breathe. So, I don't have to leave my home, I said. Not now, he confirmed. And given the circumstances, not likely at all. My eyes drifted to the tree in the corner of the living room, its faint lights still glowing from the night before. The house seemed to exhale with me. Thank you, I said softly. Truly. When I ended the call, I sat very still, not out of shock, but out of a quiet recognition. Something had shifted, not finished, not resolved, but shifted in a way that could not be undone. I was still holding the table when the phone buzzed again, this time with a message from an unknown number. It was Thomas. Court granted the stay. We move next to have the petition dismissed entirely. I'll handle all communication. Do not answer your son or his wife. Rest today. Rest. If only that were as simple as it sounded. I stood and walked slowly through the house. The floor felt different under my feet. Not lighter, but steadier. I paused in the hallway where Henry's picture hung. His smile caught forever in that warm half-tilt. I touched the edge of the frame. Well, I murmured. We're not done yet, but we're getting there. The house was quiet, but no longer in that abandoned way. Instead, it was the quiet of something waiting to be reclaimed. I moved to the living room, opened the curtains fully, and let the morning light in. It washed across the furniture, touched the edges of the tree, and even reached the wrapped gifts that were still sitting where I'd placed them. I didn't move them. There was no need. A soft knock came at the door, not sharp, not demanding. I knew even before opening it who it would be. My neighbor, Sarah, stood outside holding a small casserole dish. "You mentioned you weren't feeling well last week," she said. "I made too much stew and thought you might want some." Her kindness slid into the room like warmth from a cracked door. I hadn't realized how cold I'd been. I accepted it with a grateful nod. "Thank you, dear." She hesitated. "Your son's car was here yesterday. Everything all right?" I looked at her, really looked, and saw no judgment, only human concern. "Yes," I said simply. "Everything is finally beginning to be all right." After she left, I took a spoonful of the stew. It was simple, hearty, full of root vegetables and thyme. Food that reminded me the world was still capable of gentleness. Later in the afternoon, another message came from Thomas. "Initial review suggests your son's filing will not hold. Prepare yourself for the possibility that he will become desperate." Desperate? Yes. I had already seen the edges of that breaking in him, but now the law was behind me, and more importantly, my own spine. I closed the phone and placed it on the table. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft flakes drifting in slow spirals, covering the world in a fresh white layer. A new page, if one believed in such symbolism. I stepped closer to the window, resting my palm against the cool glass. For the first time since Christmas morning, I felt something rise inside me. Not anger, not fear, strength. The kind that comes late in life but stays once you finally claim it. Tomorrow would bring the next steps, but tonight I let the snow fall and the quiet deepen. The storm wasn't over, but neither was I. They called it a family meeting, though of course I wasn't invited. I heard about it from Lily, who texted me early in the morning, her words careful, as though she were trying not to disturb a wound. "Dad and Mom want everyone at their house tonight. I think it's about you. Please be careful. Careful." At 78, I've learned that carefulness is sometimes the last thread that keeps a person standing. But I had no intention of staying home like a child sent to the corner. If they meant to discuss my life, my house, my name in court, then they would look at me when they did it. I dressed slowly, choosing a simple gray sweater and my heavier coat. Outside, the air was sharp enough to sting, but I welcomed it. A sting is honest. Human cruelty, on the other hand, often pretends to be concern. Their house glowed warm from the outside, golden lights in every window, a wreath too expensive for its own good. I walked up the steps without hesitating and rang the bell. Voices inside stopped suddenly. Then the door opened. Sandra stood there, her smile tight as stitching. "Martha, we didn't expect you." "I know," I said, "but here I am." I stepped inside before she could block the way. The living room was full. Danny, the children, even Sandra's sister. Every face turned toward me, startled in different shades. Danny rose abruptly. "Mom, you're discussing me," I said. "I thought the subject should be present." An uncomfortable rustle went through the room. Lily looked at me with a flicker of pride. The others, well, pity and irritation, make a familiar pair in this family. Sandra cleared her throat. "We just wanted to have a calm talk about your decisions." "Then let's talk calmly," I said, taking the nearest empty chair. "Go on." Danny rubbed his forehead. "Mom, you blindsided us. Lawyers, trusts, freezes on accounts. This isn't how families handle things. You attempted to remove me from my home, I answered. That isn't how families handle things either. His mouth pressed into a thin line. You misunderstood. No, I said softly. I finally understood. Silence again. It was the kind that reveals people. Sandra stepped forward, folded her arms. We're worried about your judgment. At your age, hasty legal action can be dangerous. I acted neither hastily nor blindly, I replied. In fact, for the first time, I acted with full clarity. Danny's voice cracked with tension. Mom, we were trying to secure the property, for the future, for the family. For which family? I asked. You filed to evict the only person who owns the house. He looked down, jaw clenched. His children watched him, suddenly unsure if he was the hero he'd always insisted he was. I let the moment stretch until even the wallpaper seemed to hold its breath. Here is what will happen, I said. The petition will be dismissed. Any further attempt to control my property will go through my attorney. And from this point on, my decisions are mine alone. Sandra's lips curled, more wounded pride than true hurt. Danny looked as if a wall he'd leaned on all his life had collapsed. Lily's eyes softened, though. Relief, respect, something like awe. I stood. I won't stay for dinner. You have much to discuss amongst yourselves. No one tried to stop me as I walked to the door. I felt their eyes on my back, some angry, some confused, some suddenly very small. Outside, the cold air met my face like truth itself, sharp, clean, alive. And as I stepped off their porch, I realized something. For the first time in decades, my life belonged only to me. The next morning felt strangely quiet, as if the house were listening to me breathe. I woke earlier than usual, not from worry, but from a kind of stillness I hadn't known in years. A stillness that follows truth spoken aloud. My legs ached as always. My back stiffened when I stood. But there was no trembling inside me. Not anymore. I made tea and carried it into the living room. The tree still blinked softly in the corner, patient, unbothered by the mess humans make of their lives. I sat in my chair and let the warmth of the cup reach my fingers. I thought I might feel sadness after last night, or guilt, or some familiar weight. But none of it came. What settled inside instead was a simple clarity. I had finally stopped apologizing for existing. For a while, I listened to the house, the slow hum of the heater, the tick of the wall clock, the faint groan of old wood adjusting to the cold. Sounds that had comforted me long before Danny tried to claim them as his future assets. It wasn't long before my phone buzzed. Not a call. Lily would never push like that. But a message. Are you okay, Grandma? I wrote back. I'm all right, dear. And I was. Around noon, there was a knock at the door. Softer than Danny's, quicker than Sandra's. I didn't need to guess. Lily had come. When I opened the door, she stepped inside without waiting. Her eyes were swollen from crying, though she tried to hide it. Dad's furious, she said quietly. He's saying things I've never heard him say before. That's his burden to carry, I replied. She sat on the sofa, pulling her sleeves over her hands like she used to as a girl. Grandma, you didn't deserve any of this. And last night, I've never seen you like that. Like what? I asked. Like someone who didn't care if they liked her or not. I smiled. Ah, that. She leaned forward. It was powerful. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't insult them. You just said the truth, and they couldn't stand it. That's how truth works sometimes, I said. It doesn't ask permission. She nodded slowly, absorbing the thought. Then her face softened. I'm proud of you. Those words, gentle, unforced, landed deeper than I expected. Not because I needed validation, but because she offered it freely, without agenda. I motioned for her to sit beside me. She did, and I took her hand in mine. "Lily," I said, "you need to understand something. This family has been built on quiet sacrifices. Too many. Too long. But silence doesn't hold people together. It only erases the one who keeps silent." She squeezed my hand. "I don't want you erased." "And I won't be," I said. "Not anymore." She looked down. "Dad's saying you're turning people against him." "People judge themselves," I replied. "I merely refuse to protect him from the mirror." Her eyes glistened again, but she didn't cry this time. She seemed steadier, more grown than she had yesterday. Being told the truth, real truth, does that to a person. "Whatever happens now," she said, "I'm with you." "I know." And I did. Her presence felt like the first warm day after a brutal winter. Not spectacular, not dramatic, just real. We spent the next hour in easy conversation, nothing heavy. She helped me replace a bulb in the hallway fixture, carried a box of decorations to the closet, and fussed at me for trying to lift a chair on my own. The house felt lighter with her in it, as if she'd opened a window no one had noticed before. When she finally put on her coat, she paused at the door. "Grandma, last night, when you walked out, I realized something." "What's that?" I asked. "You weren't just defending your house. You were defending the part of you they forgot to see." I touched her cheek, brushing away a tear that had escaped despite her effort. "And you, my dear, remembered it." She hugged me tightly before leaving. When the door closed behind her, I stood there for a long moment, letting the quiet return around me. Last night had been a confrontation. Today had been understanding. Tomorrow, who knew? But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of any of it. I had my own voice now. And once a woman retrieves her voice, it becomes very hard to silence her again. The days that followed unfolded with a strange, deliberate slowness, as if time itself wanted me to feel every shift taking place around me. The air had turned sharper, the mornings colder, but inside the house something had warmed. Maybe it was the silence finally working in my favor. Maybe it was simply the relief of no longer pretending. I was in the kitchen making oatmeal when my phone began vibrating across the counter. Danny. Again. His name flashing like a warning rather than a welcome. I let it ring until it stopped. A moment later, Sandra's name appeared, then disappeared. Neither left a voicemail. They were learning, finally, that access to me was no longer automatic. By noon, the knocking started. A heavy fist on the door, impatient, uneven. Danny. "Mom," he called, voice cracking on the last note. "Open the door. We need to talk. Now." I didn't move. I continued stirring the pot on the stove, letting the oats thicken. His knocking grew harder. "I know you're in there," he said. "Your car's here. Don't do this." Do what? I wondered. Not surrender? Not fold neatly back into the shape he preferred? He knocked again, then again. A final set of short, sharp raps. And then, unexpectedly, silence. A moment later, I heard him speak through the door, no longer shouting, but something worse. Pleading. "Mom, please. You're ruining everything." I turned off the stove and let the silence sit between us like a wall. His words weren't for me. They were for the idea of me he needed, pliant, forgiving, profitable. When no answer came, I heard him mutter a curse under his breath, footsteps pounding down the porch stairs, car door slamming. The engine roared, tires spat gravel, and he was gone. I exhaled long and slow, feeling the air leave me like a weight. This wasn't victory. It wasn't satisfaction. It was simply the cost of truth. When you stop feeding someone your silence, they starve for a while. Later that afternoon, Thomas called. "We've received preliminary confirmation," he said. "Your son's petition is collapsing. The forged signature is obvious. Furthermore, his financial use of your accounts will be reviewed." I leaned against the counter. "What does that mean for him?" "It means," Thomas said gently, "that the damage he tried to inflict may return to him instead." I nodded, though a small ache bloomed under my ribs. Not pity, just the sorrow of watching someone you raised walk headfirst into consequences they built with their own hands. After the call, I sat in the living room, blanket over my knees, tea warming my palms. I watched the shadows move across the rug as the afternoon dimmed. The house felt steady, grounded. Mine. Around 5, another knock came. Soft, hesitant. Not Danny. When I opened the door, my grandson, Michael, stood there. He had his father's eyes, but not his coldness. "Grandma?" he said quietly. "Dad's losing it. He keeps saying you turned everyone against him." "I turned no one," I replied. "Truth simply arrived." He swallowed hard. He said this could ruin him. I looked at the boy, no, the young man, in front of me. Kind, unsure, trying to make sense of two worlds. "Your father made choices," I said. "And choices have a life of their own." He nodded slowly. I could see the conflict in him, the love for his father, the dawning recognition of who his father had become. Before he left, he hesitated at the threshold. "Grandma, if you need anything, I mean it." "I know," I said softly. "Thank you." When he left, I closed the door quietly and rested my back against it. One child crumbling, one child awakening, and me, finally standing where I should have stood years ago. There was no triumph in any of it, only the quiet ache of truth settling into its rightful place. But as I looked around my living room, at the walls that had held my life, at the light softening into evening, I felt something steady inside me. No matter how they twisted, no matter how they shouted, no matter how desperate they became, I was no longer someone they could move. Some mornings arrive softly, without asking anything of you. Others come with a quiet certainty, as if they're placing a hand on your shoulder and saying, "It's time now." That morning felt like the latter. I woke before sunrise, the sky still a deep blue pressing against the windows. My joints were stiff, but the ache no longer felt like a burden, more like a reminder that even old wood can hold a house upright. I moved slowly through the kitchen, turned on the kettle, and watched the thin stream of steam curl into the dim air. When the tea was ready, I took it to the window. Outside, a thin layer of snow glimmered under the streetlights. The world felt calm. My world felt mine again. I spent the morning sorting through papers. Not the frantic kind of sorting people do when they're afraid, but the deliberate kind of a woman taking inventory of a life she intends to keep. Receipts, letters, tax papers, old notes from Henry. I placed everything important into one tidy stack. It felt like sweeping out corners where fear had been gathering dust. Around noon, Thomas called again. "The petition is officially dismissed," he said, his voice steady, almost pleased. "Your son has no legal standing. The forged document is being investigated." I closed my eyes briefly. "Thank you, Thomas." "You're protected now," he added. "The trust holds everything. No one can interfere. Protected." Such a small word for something that felt like a door finally locked from the inside. After the call, I sat in Henry's chair with my tea and let the house settle around me. It no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like it was breathing with me, quietly relieved. Later in the afternoon, Lily arrived. She didn't knock this time. She tapped gently on the glass pane beside the door, the way she did when she was little and wanted me to look up from my knitting. When I opened the door, she stepped in with a smile that didn't hide anything. Not fear, not sorrow, just warmth. "I heard," she said softly. "It's done," I replied. She sat opposite me, folding her hands in her lap. "Dad's not handling it well." "I imagine not. He keeps saying you've betrayed him." I let out a slow breath. People often call it betrayal when someone stops letting them exploit kindness. Lily nodded, her eyes shining with understanding that felt new and honest. "I'm glad you fought back." I touched her hand. "I didn't fight him, dear. I fought for myself." She smiled then, a small, sorrowful smile. "I wish Mom and Dad could see you like I do." "They see what suits them," I said, "and that's no longer my responsibility." We spent the afternoon together, cleaning the living room, putting away the last of the decorations. Lily insisted on carrying the heavier boxes, scolding me each time I tried to lift anything more than a book. She hummed as she worked, an absent little tune she'd picked up from her childhood. The sound filled the house gently, like stitching mending a tear. At one point, she looked at the tree, still lit in the corner. "Do you want me to help you take it down?" "No," I said. "Not yet. Let it stay a bit longer. It was a bad Christmas, but it doesn't mean the tree has to suffer for it." She laughed quietly. When she left that evening, she hugged me in that fierce way of hers, as though she was trying to anchor something in me. Maybe she was. Maybe she succeeded. After she walked out into the snow, I stood at the doorway watching her footprints fade. Then I closed the door and turned the lock with a click that sounded like a promise. I sat once more in Henry's armchair, drew the blanket over my knees, and listened to the stillness. Not loneliness, not emptiness, just peace. For the first time in many years, the house didn't feel like something slipping away from me. It felt like something returning, a life reclaimed quietly, without applause, without spectacle, but reclaimed all the same. A year can pass quietly, almost unnoticed when you're older. Days fold into one another, seasons slip by without asking permission. But this year, this particular year, felt different. It felt lived. It felt chosen. Christmas morning returned at last, soft and pale, settling over the neighborhood like a blanket freshly shaken out. The frost clung to the trees, catching the early light in thin silver threads. I stood by the window with a cup of tea warming my hands, watching the world without rushing toward it. No expectations. No dread. No waiting for people who had long since chosen another life. My house smelled faintly of pine and cinnamon. I decorated the tree slowly over the past week, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to. Each ornament I hung felt like placing one more claim on the life that belonged to me. No shadow of eviction hovered over the roof. No forged paper sat hidden beneath deceit. Everything inside these walls, every picture, every book, every quiet corner was safe. Mine. I set the tea down and walked to the tree. Beneath it lay only one gift this year, a small package wrapped in brown paper, tied with twine. No elaborate bows, no false sentiment. Just something simple I'd chosen for myself. A book I'd wanted for years but always postponed buying, because someone else's need came first. Not anymore. A knock sounded at the door, gentle, familiar. I didn't hurry. When I opened it, Lily stood on the porch, cheeks flushed from the cold, holding a thermos and 2 pastries in a paper bag. "Merry Christmas, Grandma," she said, smiling in that warm way of hers that brightens a room before she even steps inside. "Merry Christmas, dear." She came in, stamping snow from her boots, and placed the pastries on the kitchen table. "I didn't want you spending the morning alone," she said. I looked at her, really looked, and felt that quiet gratitude settle in my chest again. "I'm not alone," I said. "Not anymore." She poured the tea from the thermos. "Dad hasn't been doing well," she said gently, eyes lowering. "That's for him to sort out," I replied, calm as winter air. "I've sorted my part." She nodded, knowing I meant it. "I'm proud of you," she said softly. I smiled. "I'm proud of me, too." We sat together for a long while, speaking of small things. Her classes, the neighbor's new dog, the way the cold had come earlier than usual this year. Nothing heavy, nothing painful. Sometimes the most meaningful conversations are the ones without sharp edges. When she left shortly after noon, I walked her to the door. She hugged me tightly, the kind of hug that says more than words ever could. I watched her cross the yard, her boots leaving crisp prints in the snow. She looked back once, waved, and then disappeared down the street. The house settled into quiet again, but it wasn't the empty quiet of the past. It was a quiet I'd earned, a quiet that belonged to me. I returned to the living room and sat in Henry's chair, pulling the blanket over my knees. Outside, snow began to fall once more, soft flakes drifting past the window like slow, deliberate confetti. And I let myself think, really think, about the year behind me. The fear, the betrayal, the legal battles, the confrontation, the truth, and finally, the peace. Not a triumphant peace, not a triumphant ending, but a dignified one, the kind that slips into your bones and straightens your back without you noticing. I had defended my life. I had reclaimed my home. I had spoken the truth without shouting. I had drawn a boundary and placed it gently, firmly, exactly where it needed to be. And my heart, though older, though weathered, beat steady with something it hadn't felt in years, respect, not from others, though some had found their way to it, from myself. I looked once more at the tree, its lights blinking softly, then at the single gift beneath it. A gift I had chosen, a year I had chosen, a life I was choosing still. I leaned back and let the warmth from the lamp settle over me. And if someone out there, some woman sitting in her own quiet house, needed to hear it, then let these words carry to her gently, like a breath across fresh snow. Choose yourself. Choose your voice. Choose the life that still belongs to you. No matter how late it feels, it is never too late to stand up quietly and begin again.